Hey, welcome. My name is Rachel Smith, and this is the Natural Health Rising podcast. I am a certified functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner and the owner of Natural Health Rising, which is my online holistic functional medicine company where I help people who have autoimmune diseases, chronic illnesses, mystery symptoms, and a whole host of other imbalances restore their health by natural means. On this podcast, you're going to hear conversations between myself and other health experts on functional medicine and general holistic health. My goal is to provide you with the tools you need in order to help you rise to your healthiest and happiest self.
So on this episode of the Natural Health Rising podcast, I have Pamela Wirth with me. Pamela is a lifelong learner, Carnegie Mellon trained MBA, a former public company executive, management consultant, author, and health enthusiast. She founded Hello Health with doctor-formulated supplements following a neurodiversity diagnosis of her son and is dedicated to nutrition, education, and building a network to help heal more people, particularly those with neurodiversity, autoimmune, and autism syndromes. Ms. Wirth enjoys health and wellness, traveling and helping others, specifically enabling children to feel better from the inside out. She combined these passions along with her experience while living in Europe and Asia with U.S. doctors and other families to write Hello Health. Ms. Wirth's consulting, life experiences, and attention to detail allow her to work with a number of people and companies with a passion for helping others. Welcome to the show, Pamela.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
So, can you start by telling us a little bit more about this story of your son and what triggered you to found Hello Health?
Yeah, of course. I've always thought of myself as a pretty healthy person. But it's just amazing when things start to go awry, how much you learn and realize, okay, there's a lot I didn't know. And there's still a lot I don't know. But it's been, I guess, going on a little over 10 years now through this journey. So let me start by saying I now have two healthy teenage boys. But at one point, one of them went from this perfectly normal child to baby talking, crawling, eyes constantly dilated, strange neck and shoulder shrugging, tics, weird verbalizations of like throat clearing, and it was all kind of progressive over a period of a few weeks, even though it kind of feels like overnight, but it was really over a few weeks. Went to the pediatrician like every normal parent would do with their kid and be like, hey, something's not right here. And and we belong to a pediatric practice that has a lot of doctors in it. So when the first one said, oh, kids will be kids, I was like, okay, well, that's not the right one. Let's go. So then I made an appointment with another one, and then another one. And then I went outside of the practice and made appointments because I got crazy diagnoses like, well, it's allergies. Well, he seems depressed. Why don't we put him on Prozac? Why don't we get him checked into a hospital for observation for a couple weeks? One of them said he's now autistic. He needs to take care of him the rest of his life. And I mean, none of this just really it didn't feel like we were getting to the root of what was going on. And I'm a problem solver by nature. And so I just continued to dig and dig and dig. And now, finally found a neurologist, MD, in retrospect, more integrative by nature, because the first thing she said was, let's pull some blood and find out what's going on inside. Now, at the time, I was like, yeah, that makes sense to me. Now what I'm wondering is, why don't we always do that on children? And does it have to be blood work? Can we start to think about how we can do this with urine or saliva or stools, or just instead of just throwing medicine at the problem? And medicine's great, don't get me wrong, but if we don't know if it's the right medicine based on the data, then maybe we're taking things we don't have to take, or we're taking the wrong things. And so the blood work came back and it showed that he was low in D3, low in B12, genetic marker MTHFR, which about half the population has, which consequently is not that big a deal if you take methylfolate, because what is happening if you have a lot of folic acid in your diet is you're not really absorbing your vitamins and minerals correctly. It kind of acts like a barrier, for the most simplistic way to kind of explain that. And then he had an active infection called CMV, which is a pretty common virus. Most people would be like, oh yeah, I felt kind of fluey for, a few days or a week or something. And then he had high strep titers suggesting an active strep infection, even though he was negative for strep throat. So that was kind of wild to me that he had an active viral infection and an active bacterial infection. And the way the doctor described it was, look, because he's not absorbing his vitamins and minerals correctly, the infection has crossed the blood-brain barrier and is now causing motor, vocal, and mood problems. And I'm like, okay, wow. And had we not gotten that blood work, we never would have known any of this. And he would be on a cocktail of all kinds of different things. And she said, okay, so look, I'm going to teach you how to make certain supplements at home because he needs, about 15 different probiotics on a daily basis. He needs these 2 prebiotics that prevent negative overgrowth of bacteria in the gut. And it provides a good foundation for the probiotics to really get in there and grow. I'm going to, he needs to have daily oregano to help fight off the bacteria in his gut, daily olive leaf to kill the viruses in his gut, cinnamon for fungi. And the list kind of went on. And then for the inflammation, because the body is obviously angry. And so inflammation is the cause of all disease. And if you can start to minimize the amount of inflammation around you in your environment, as well as in your body, then you've got a better chance of kind of fighting through this. So she goes, look, sugar causes inflammation. It's got to come out. And for someone like him, you've really got to take him off gluten for a while, like a year. And then we tried cheese too, because I had read that cheese causes inflammation. But you can only go so far with a kiddo who's in 1st grade. And so he was like, look, the cheese comes back after 6 weeks. I said, fine. The gluten we made do without. And sure enough, about a year later, he popped back and he hasn't left us since. He's a thriving teenager. Everything's great. And so a lot of people say, well, it was all diet. No, I wouldn't say it was all diet. I do believe that nutrition and diet make a huge impact. But it really, I don't think we get enough, even if you eat 100% right, I don't think we get enough of what we need for our bodies to function as well as you want them to. And you really need to understand if there's the presence of any infection. So that's my long-winded story of why I started the company, because I was so upset that had I not been this super pain in the butt person that continued to push, if I didn't have this nice SUV that I could sell to pay for doctor bills to keep getting after this, like all these ifs. And so I ended up writing a book along with 3 doctors and 2 other families. A second book is coming out shortly. And then started the supplement company with the idea that it also comes with education and research and a growing community that we are going to be fostering, because I relied really heavy on confidential Facebook groups, which in retrospect is really kind of scary and dangerous considering what they do with the data. And so I really want a safe place for people to be able to connect that don't have to worry about that. So.
Wow, that's an amazing story. First off, I'm happy that you found such an amazing neurologist, because that is not a common story of what a neurologist would say, like, oh, cut out gluten and take these probiotics and do all these things that are definitely more integrative and holistic. So that's amazing. And you talked about the MTHFR gene a little bit. Can you go into that just a little bit more? Like, how do people test for this? What do they do about it?
Well, interestingly enough, I mean, it can be done by saliva or it can be done by blood. And, it was funny when we were going through this. I mean, we spent so much money on all this stuff, really, really expensive blood work. And I had someone close to me say, well, can't you find out genetic stuff through 23andMe? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, at the time it's like $99. And I thought, well, okay, I guess it can't hurt. So then I did that on him. And then what you do is you download the raw DNA, and there's a site called geneticgenie.org. There's others, but that's the one that we used. Uploaded it, and then, it shows up on there too. And then the genetic things that we found through geneticgenie.org matched 100% with the blood work, which I found super scary and wild that you can get that much out of that much saliva in terms of what's going on in your body. But and there's so much more to it in terms of, like, is it heterogeneous? Like, do you have 1 copy or do you have 2 from both parents? And there's different types of MTHFR. And so some tend to align more with things like autoimmune and allergies and heart disease, stroke, all the good stuff, which is why there's a really not so polite acronym when people
Right. When if you look at it, it looks like it says a bad word.
yeah.
Um, so, and you mentioned like these tests were pricey. Did I hear you say you sold your car to pay for your doctor bills?
Yeah, it's terrible. Terrible.
Yeah. Well, and part of me says I wish that our insurance system was different. I wish that it was easier. I wish that those tests didn't cost money out of pocket all the time. But I also think it's a beautiful story to share because if you really, really care about your health or you don't have the funds and like you need to go that route, then sometimes you got to get creative. Like selling your car is a huge, terrible thing, but also look at what it did for you by being able to have access to those tests and things that you guys really needed.
Yep. So we still have the crappy car that I bought. Now the
Oh,
teenager.
um, so let's talk a little bit more about like neurodiversity and autism. When you say those words, maybe most people aren't familiar with those. So can you break those terms down and how they manifest in someone?
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting discovery, I think, now that we're starting to understand more about the gut brain axis. And so um neurodiversity, I think, I've had different doctors describe it different ways. It can be anything from EDD to ADHD to um different spectrum disorders. What's wild to me too is that 90% of our neurotransmitters, I mean, the stuff that makes us sleep and our mood and whatever else, I mean, you would think is in our brain, which is why I think, all these things that help uh, alter mood were created for the brain, but they're actually managed and produced in the gut. And so imagine that you've got, and you've got cell for cell of outside organisms to inside organisms of your own DNA going on. And so you've got like this whole um, Star Wars, if you will, going on in your body of good versus evil. And you've really got to make sure you keep that gut in check, because when things get out of whack, it travels up the vagus nerve to the brain and it causes sleep problems and mood disorders, you know, tics, all these things. And, what's really interesting too is when I had gone to subsequent doctors after the initial one had helped. And one of the doctors says, well, do tics run in your family? Like, you know, vocalizations or motor or whatever. And I said, no. And I said, and he said, well, did anybody stutter growing up? And I said, well, I had a horrible stuttering problem and I had a speech therapist growing up. And he said, did you have a lot of sickness growing up? And I said, yeah, I had sore throats, sinus infections. I mean, I was always, feeling kind of crappy. And he's like, yeah, you probably, and he said, you're, lucky that you were able to work through that and grow through it. But, and he said, did you eat a lot of sugar? And I said, oh my gosh, I eat so much sugar. And, and it's really interesting how these things are kind of coming to light of when you're out of whack, your body craves the stuff that feeds the bad bacteria. I mean, it's telling your brain, hey, I need some more of that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of an interesting aha moment for me.
Mm-hmm. This might be a loaded question, but
Yeah.
based on your experience, what do you think because it's probably not one, we can probably agree on that, but what are the root causes of neurodiversity, autoimmune, autism?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one cause. I think we all have genetic predispositions to things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's certain elements that can trigger those genetic predispositions to come to light. And I do think that with certain changes that we can either prolong those coming or maybe even, diminish them or minimize them. Um, you know, Going back to inflammation, when your body is overly inflamed and can't handle much more, it's going to kind of, I think, go back to some of those genetic predispositions that you may have. And so thinking, about some of the changes that we had made to minimize some of that, obviously through gluten and sugar, for at least a year. Um, and even now, I grew up in that big Irish Catholic family where you made sweets on the weekends and at night for dessert, and, the bread and butter and the whole 9 yards. And so it's been kind of interesting to kind of change our habits a little bit at home. When we're out and about, we still, indulge and do all that, but I've made a conscious effort to try and clean up the house, from a sugar and from just a carb loading standpoint. And so we lean more on things like potatoes and rice, which are still carb loading, but a little different than kind of those simple breads and pastas that, is frankly easy and cheap, but you just got to be careful about doing too much of that. And, you know, there's so much more toxicity in our environment than there used to be. And so, kind of taking a step back and saying, all right, so what am I cleaning the house with? What kind of soap are we using on the body? What kind of shampoo are we using? And just really taking a step back and saying, okay, so, and then, we even went a step further because we lived up in an area that was less than 2 miles away from a major freeway, which puts off a lot of problems. We were in the landing zone of Scottsdale Airport, which is one of the largest and busiest private airports in the country. And so we moved out of that area because those planes can put off leaded fuel. They're still allowed to. And then in the area that we were living, it was close to major power lines. And so we made sure to select, and there's, some really interesting studies that have come out about EMF and making sure that we're at least a mile away from a major power line now. And that the power that goes into the house doesn't actually touch any of the bedroom walls. And so it kind of sounds extreme, but when you kind of put it all together, it's just like stacking up, and the body can only handle so much. And anyway, that's some of what we did too.
No, that's amazing, because those are things that most people don't think about, like, well, the airport you're next to, the power lines and this and that. It's like, yes, it all stacks up. It might seem small when you look at it by itself, but when you look at this full picture, it's so many things that contribute to the inflammation and the toxicity and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, what's the solution? Where does someone start who maybe they themselves, or I guess maybe their children, are experiencing neurodiversity or autism?
Yeah, we have a sample protocol. And so if anybody wants to get in touch with us, I'm happy to send it to them. Email address is Pamela, Pamela at hello.health. And I'm happy to send it to you too. And then you can share it if anybody gets in touch with you.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really important to start taking notes. Just write down everything of what's going on. Because over time you'll forget. You have to relay the same facts over and over again. At one point, I took everything I had and I just typed it up, and I was like, here, add that to the file. And really thinking back to when there was a change and how there was a change and what could have impacted that change. Was there anybody else in the family that was maybe going through an illness or a change? And then taking a look at the diet and start saying, okay, so how much are we doing of fruits, vegetables, carbohydrates, protein? Can we pull sugar and gluten out for a while and just substitute some different things? Getting tested for any genetic things, the presence of certain things that can really trigger some bad stuff. CMV. So in the viruses category, there's CMV, EBV, which is like Epstein-Barr. There's in obviously Lyme is a big one. Then on the bacterial side, taking a look at things like mycoplasma, which is walking pneumonia, which is really, really common. And you don't feel inherently sick, but it causes major problems. It's just like this lingering infection. And the chronic infection can cause inflammation, which really upsets the body. And then obviously testing for ASO, DNAS-B, which are strep titers. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else. Certain vitamin levels obviously are important. And so just really making sure that from a high level, you don't have the presence of any known, viruses, bacteria, fungal infections, and then your vitamins are in check. And it's pretty common for folks with MTHFR to have a family history of things like allergies, eczema, heart disease, stroke. So if you've got a family history of that, I mean, there's probably something going on there that you can then take a look at. And then it's really simple. You just remove folic acid from your diet and take a daily methylfolate, which is really very cheap when you buy it at the store or Amazon or whatever. And most people with MTHFR have trouble absorbing vitamin B12 and D3. So those are really two big ones to watch out for. And, frankly, even living in the Sun Belt, we don't get enough D3 even from the sun. And so just making sure that it's pretty hard to take too much vitamin D3. Now, vitamin D itself is not great for your body, but D3 is. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What would your maybe top 3 pieces of advice be for, or like, how could we support parents of children parents who have children who are autistic?
Yeah, I mean, finding a good team of doctors, both regular MDs and naturopaths, or, if you can, find an integrative doctor, which has an MD, but also understands the power of taking a look at things like nutrition and the presence of infections and genetics to see how that may impact health and wellness. Finding those practitioners is really, really hard. And then, things like this are really hard on the entire family. And so if you can, think about a family psychologist that not only meets with, the children, but also with the parents and with the family as a whole. Because it's hard on siblings, it's hard on parents, it's hard on the kid going through it. And just really creating that support network, and then just really doing good things for yourself, just really taking care of yourself is important. That putting that own oxygen mask on first and making sure you're keeping your mood and your own energy up is hard, but so necessary.
Mm-hmm. Were there things that you did for yourself? Like, could you give some examples of how you maintained your own mental and
Yeah.
physical health during those times?
So for me personally, I do really well with exercise. That's not everybody's go-to, but for me, it's really important. And so I try and do that every morning. It just puts me in the right space mentally.
Mm-hmm.
Or, I mean, petting the dog. I can't tell you how relaxing it is to pet the dog. It's just, they are just so loving and provide so much support. And that actually was something that one of the doctors had at the time when we were going through this. We didn't actually have any dogs. We now have 2. And they said, it's really important for your son to go out and pick out an animal this weekend. I was like, okay, let's go do this. And so we got a
Oh, wow.
rescue and he picked out the dog. And they said, it's really important for him to have someone loving, to just feel that connection to, as well as an obligation to take care of something. So that was really interesting, and it did help a lot, which is kind of wild, but it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, dogs are, it's hard to be mad at a dog. They're always just full of love, and that's all they know how to do. So I can see
Yeah.
how that can be great support. Let's talk a little bit about Hello Health for a second. So can you give an overview of some of your favorite supplements that you guys have, and what is the use of them, and kind of what makes them stand out from other companies?
Yeah, of course. Everything's made in the US. The ingredients are clean, which is important to me because I take them, my kids take them, my family members, and then obviously I, want to do good. So, in going back to the gut's super important. And so the 2 that I really, really lean on hard, first one is Belly Great. It's got 15 probiotics that the neurologist had first taught, me and others about, that we need on a daily basis, as well as those 2 prebiotics that really help those probiotics, gain a good foundation. Plus, it's got a little bit of vitamin D3 plus a little bit of methylfolate. Some people might be saying, hey, I don't know if I have MTHFR. I don't know if I should be taking it. So the interesting thing is, if you don't have MTHFR, taking methylfolate versus folic acid, it doesn't really matter. So, and if you do have MTHFR, taking daily methylfolate is great. So it works for all audiences, children and adults. It's in a capsule, a small one. So and the idea was that this stuff gets so expensive. And so the idea was that to keep it cost effective and in a mechanism that's good for kids and adults. So it's just one bottle, if folks can share. So it's one for children, 2 for adults. And then we've got a liquid coming out here shortly, which I think will be great. but the idea being that you can either swallow it or you can open it up and put it in food or drink. So that's, and then it's perfectly measured. You don't have to worry about, spilling or making a mess or whatever. So, and so that's putting the good stuff in. Now, equally important is to pull that bad stuff out. So we've got a product called Strong, and, it's a really interesting, learning that I went through in terms of how when you pull the bad stuff out of your gut, it not only removes inflammation, but it also helps your immune system. And so that's kind of been an interesting learning for me too. And so Immunostrong could also be called Inflamastrong if you wanted to, because it promotes a healthy inflammation response. But it's got things like your omegas, cinnamon, sunflower phosphatidylserine, which is great for folks with ADD. Oregano, olive leaf extract, boswellia, which is frankincense, which is amazing antioxidant, antiviral, antibacterial. There's so much more. There's 10 things in there. And so that's a really awesome one that is pulling that bad stuff out while you're putting the good stuff in.
How often would somebody take something like that?
Daily. I mean, you don't have to take it daily, but we've been taking it daily for years, and our labs keep getting better and better over time. So,
okay.
And then we've got other products too, like organic sea moss, which is super. We've got 10 mushroom complex, which is great for the immune system, vitamin D3, magnesium glycinate, which is super for sleep and for mood. There's different forms of magnesium. And so just buying the cheapest magnesium is not always the way to go, because it can be like a citrate or an oxide or something, which really just loosens your number twos. It doesn't necessarily do anything for your brain. And so just kind of being smart about which magnesium you're taking and why is important. And then we've got a bunch of other products that we're bringing out that are just really focused on brain, belly, and immune.
Yeah, no, the glycinate's my go-to because it's more absorbable and very calming. And yeah, I love it. Love magnesium glycinate. Okay, awesome. Is there anything else that you feel like you want to share about autism and neurodiversity? Like anything controversial about it or anything that you've learned that you feel like people need to understand?
I just wish that before they would throw a diagnosis on, that they would allow people a cost-effective way to get to the bottom of testing. Because I have no doubt that the diagnosis is real, but there are things that are within our control to help folks live a better life. And when we understand from the data what it's looking like, if there's any infections, any genetics, any nutritional needs, those three things really help a lot. So helping folks really have that access to that is so, as well as a community to talk to. I mean, it's I never would have learned any of this had it not been for just continuing to seek answers, and then people that were willing to help. So
would you say that anyone can reverse autism? Or
no, I don't know if I would say that. From there's obviously varying levels of disorders, and I do believe that by getting your hands around the nutrition, the presence of any infections, and genetics, that we can help whoever that is live their best life. And in some, if it's caught early, or if it's really dependent upon that and it was misdiagnosed, then yes. So did my son really have autism, or was it a misdiagnosis? I don't know. It's possible that he would have always had those symptoms, had we not gotten to the bottom of why he was having those symptoms. So, but I do believe it's important to really get to the root of what's going on. And, the one thing I will say about autoimmune is it's truly a disease of inflammation, just hitting different organs, if you will. And, there's over 80 autoimmune disorders now, and it seems like every single time there's a new symptom for a new organ, they give it a new name and then a new diagnosis code, and then you get a new drug. And autoimmune in particular, I feel very strongly about we can really reverse when we take a hard line on the genetics, the nutrition, and the presence of any infections.
Yeah. Is there anybody in your life that you or anyone else in your family who has autoimmunity?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny too, like my mom, she's now fine. She had been diagnosed back in the 80s with IBS, which was And so now that she doesn't eat an abundance of gluten, she doesn't have those problems. And so it was like, and then I think IBS was kind of the precursor to what's now celiac. And of course, you can test for celiac. But yeah, no, there's a long line of autoimmune folks in our family for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what I mostly work with in my practice. And I have or had Hashimoto's and, went through that whole healing journey as well. So I get it. Like I do think that most of them can be reversed and put into remission. You just have to, like you said, you have to figure out what's causing it. You have to get the right testing, the right support, change your diet, change your lifestyle. So totally on board with all that.
And so how are you doing now with Hashimoto's? Do you feel like you've got it under control and
Oh,
reversed?
yeah. Yes. Yes. I went from years ago having, gosh, like 20 plus symptoms that were just destroying my life, and at a young age too. I mean, I'm only 28 and I was 23 when I got my diagnosis, and it was just terrible. And now I'm to the point where I don't experience any of the things that I used to. So it was a lot of work, but well worth it.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think we can wrap up here, but I do have one final question for you, which is if you could leave the listeners with one tip that they could implement maybe today or this week in their lives to help them live a healthier, happier life, what would that be?
One thing. Continue to ask why.
I like that. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Pamela. Do you want to share where else people can find you? I know you already shared your email in case they want to grab that protocol, but go ahead and share all your other places.
Yeah, no, thank you. The website is www.hello.health or gethellohealth.com. And my email address is Pamela, Pamela @hello.health. And constantly looking for folks that want to join our community on Facebook and help others, as well as we've got growing testimonials and video testimonials from people that we throw up on YouTube as well to help folks. So anyway, I really appreciate it, Rachel. You're amazing in putting this together.
Yeah, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'll go ahead and put all those links in the show notes as well so people can access that.
Super.
Thanks for watching the episode. I really hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, make sure that you like the video and leave a comment and share it with a friend who really needs to hear it. Because when you share this information, you're also going to help other people level up their health. And if you or somebody else you know wants to work on their health and they're looking for a functional medicine practitioner, feel free to reach out to me to apply to work together. Thanks for watching, and keep striving to become your healthiest, happiest self.